everything else has been a project and not just knitting lately, and I needed just some good old-fashioned knitting. He's adorable. He's just not quite finished. I'm still feeling optimistic about it, so we're gonna see what happens. Like, easy breezy, cast on the smutty stitches and get knitting.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast episode today after a little time off last weekend. Thank you so much for understanding. I did just pop up on the community tab here that I was going to take a little bit of time off last weekend, and I'm really glad that I did. Everything's good. I was actually just enjoying a little bit of time with my mom and my sister. We went wedding dress shopping for the first time, so I decided to just kind of make a little vacation out of it. And so I'm happy to be back this week because I've accomplished so much since we spoke last. I'm going to tell you today about a project that is done and is just ready to be blocked, and it needs buttons, but that's okay. We'll get there. I have a new cast on that I was kind of in the works of planning in the last podcast episode. I also have a whip that was supposed to have been a finished object, and holy moly, did it just get a little bit much for me. And maybe I'm missing a couple. Oh, another whip. There's a little bit to go over today. So before we get into it, it's been a little while since I really introduced myself. So like I said, I'm Nora. I'm coming to you from a small farm in Connecticut, and I've been knitting for just the past couple of years now, and I've been enjoying documenting the process here on this channel. Since I started knitting, I've always considered myself kind of an adventurous knitter. I'm always here to try something new and to experiment and play, and those are just things that are really integral to the process for me. And so I also kind of make by the philosophy that the imperfections are what makes something so perfectly handmade. I really try to embrace the little mistakes and the little quirks here and there. Obviously, some things are worth fixing and other things are just little signatures that it was indeed something made by your own human hand. So if any of that sounds like something you can get down with, then I definitely would love to have you hang out with us more often. I usually post on Saturday mornings at 9:30 a.m. And with all that out of the way, why don't we go ahead and dive on in? I'll start today by chatting super quickly about what I'm wearing, which I'm actually happy I dug out today because I haven't worn this, I think, at all yet this year. It's kind of just one of those things that it never seems like quite the right weather to wear this in. So this is my Tulsa tank by Rebecca Clow. It's a bottom-up knit. I'm working on another Tulsa tank that we won't really talk about today, but this one I knit out of some thrifted mercerized cotton yarn. I think the brand was called Alina or something like that. And what you're actually looking at is what is in the pattern as the back of the vest style of tank top. So this top comes with 3 different necklines: a vest, V-neck, and square neck. So what's on the back of me right now is the front of the V-neck, and then this part is the back of the vest, which is more of a crew neck style. And to be honest with you, I don't know that I've ever even worn it the other way around. I pretty much always wear this as the higher neck and then the V in the back, and I absolutely love it. I actually get a ton of compliments when I wear this out and about, so that's pretty fun. But it's just one of those things where the cotton is a little bit on the thicker side, and so even though this is kind of a looser gauge knit and it's very breezy and airy, and it is of course 100% cotton, I tend to kind of not go for it on these really hot summer days because it does just still feel a little bit too thick. But it was the perfect thing to throw on today. I love the color of it, and so that's what I'm wearing. Maybe actually I will use that to segue into my whip. I'll wait a second to tell you about the more finished object of the two, and let's instead talk about my Camisole number 7 by my favorite things, knitwear, which I'm knitting out of Sandisgarn 10 Lena. That's a linen viscose cotton blend yarn. I think the color is called burgundy, and so it's kind of similar to what I have on, and it's actually at a point where I can pop her onto Helena the hanger. So why don't we do that now? Okay, actually, just kidding. While it is at a point where I could put it onto the hanger, I have it on these super, super tiny in the round circular needles. And I'm going to kind of kill two birds with one stone here because I have yet to actually like try this on and make sure that I'm knitting this in the right size. And I do want to get it onto the hanger so we could discuss a few things about it. So I think we will do something we just haven't done in a super long time, which is a little try it on tubing and chat. All right, I've got my cord here. While I'm moving this over, I feel like it's actually worth discussing kind of what's been going on with this project. So this is a top-down V-neck camisole. It's obviously knit up in fingering weight yarn. I'm knitting mine on the recommended 3mm needles. And a few things about this project. Number one, the yarn is pretty darn splitty. I don't remember really having any notable issues when working with the Sandisgarn Lena, which is the more, I guess, kind of like DK weight or worsted weight version of the same fiber blend. But with this 10 Lena, I don't know why, it just feels like the little individual strands of yarn, they really do tend to sort of fray apart while you're working on it. And so this being a project that is comprised of a broken rib stitch pattern, which really just means that every other row, so you're working a 2-row sequence kind of throughout the camisole, and that is to knit purl 1 row, so basically like a row of ribbing, and then the next row you just knit all of the stitches, which is, it's nice because it's a very intuitive stitch pattern that gives you a really interesting looking result. And to be honest, I almost even prefer the look of the wrong side of this fabric, so I feel like that's something to explore in the future. But basically you're working that, and then with this particular design, kind of the most recognizable feature of this camisole is the decorative increasing and decreasing that happens along the bust. And it just kind of creates the lines of like a bustier top or something, which for me is why I've selected this as kind of more of a going out or date night top. But that's all made up with increasing and decreasing. So you're working this knit purl, knit around, increase, decrease. And so there's a lot of back and forth and just kind of less rhythmic things happening with the way that you're knitting this. It's not just knit in the round and forget about it. And so for me, I found that quite often I've had to dip into a stitch multiple times, especially when I'm doing those increases and decreases, to make sure that I'm always working every strand of the plies in the yarn. And so I have just found that to be the littlest bit frustrating and finicky when working with this particular yarn. And like I said, I just think it's strange because I didn't have that issue at all with the Sandisgarn Lena. It's only been an issue with the 10 Lena. So now on top of that, you're working on 3mm needles, and because this top, it's actually intended to have some negative ease, it's not, I was struggling to find a cord and needles in my set that was going to work out for the size top that I was making. I was kind of finding that my standard length 3mm needles and then any cord I could find to pair them with was creating a little bit too large a circumference. So then the stitches were super stretched out across the needles. And it was, I think, kind of adding to the issue of the plies separating. I don't know why that was that was a thing, but it was. So that was kind of getting frustrating. So then I was trying to find if I had shorty needles that were 3mm, and I don't think that I do, except for one pair that's more of like a mid-length, and those are a carbon fiber needle that have the metal tip, and I don't find those to have a particularly flush seam across those different materials on the needles. So that combined with the splitty yarn was causing me headaches. And then the only other option I had left were these little fixed circulars, and these are Addy Turbo, what are these, like a nickel plated something or another. And they do work well with this yarn, but the circumference of these is definitely just a little bit smaller than what I would like. I usually use these when doing something like a sleeve or a neck opening or something. I don't really use them for the circumference of my bust. And so then that's kind of just been causing issues, because then the stitches are all super bunched up on top of each other. And the moral of the story here is that I've been finding that the tools that I have to get the job done, I'm never the first person to just go and buy the right thing. I'm kind of like, oh, I'll just use what I have. But I do feel like there are certain instances where it's kind of hindering my desire to work on this project, because I just know that the experience of knitting it is a little bit trickier than I'd like it to be. And so I kind of have found myself only wanting to work on this project when I know I have like a full afternoon that I can dedicate to it, because otherwise it's just so frustrating to sort of like pick it up, and then once you get into the swing of things, you feel like it's time to put it back down again if you just have an hour. Whereas if you actually have some time to just dedicate towards this project and this project alone, you almost, you're like practicing and getting back in touch with exactly how you have to move these stitches across the needles. Even as I'm just moving this onto the try-it-on tubing, the yarn is so splitty that it's kind of catching one little thread as I'm trying to shift that yarn over. But I think also part of why I wanted to move this over today is because I need to do like a little inventory sweep of what I've got here. I feel as though I have the proper tools to get this done somewhere, and everything is just scattered right now. I have some project bags that I've never really like cleaned out after a project, and I have some swatch yarns that I have in other project bags, and maybe I like left the needles in there. So I kind of feel like I need to just get everything onto try-it-on tubing off of needles, and then reevaluate what size of needle, cables, cords I actually need for different projects, and maybe even see if it's worth it to invest in a few more of the more popular lengths of cords and stuff that I use to make sure that everything that I'm knitting on is the most positive experience possible. Because I just don't think that you realize how much that plays a role. So that was just something that I figured I would mention today, this sort of hindrance of the tools, but also the splitty yarn. And I'm curious to know if other people found that too, or is it maybe just this particular batch of the Tenlino? What's going on here that this yarn is so silly splitty? Other than that, though, I have really been enjoying the fact that this is an engaging knit without being an all-consuming, mindful project. I do think that if you're someone who hasn't knit texture a whole lot, but you're interested in it, that this is a good project to get your feet wet and really get into the changing, the constant changing of the knit and the purl and the increase and the decrease. And I am now at the point where I'm working on the decreasing section. So kind of where you've passed the fullest point of the bust and you're coming down and tapering down with the design lines. And I'm finding that I have to like stay glued to the pattern to work these parts. Maybe by the time I'm at the end, it'll all become intuitive and I'll know what's going on. But right now I'm like crossing off, okay, did that. I've tried to make it easier by color coding the stitch markers that I have, along with like marking that out in the pattern itself with different colored markers and stuff, because anything that I could do to just make this project go a little bit easier, I am in. And then all of that being said, once you get through those increases and decreases, you're just doing that broken rib in the body for as long as you want to. So it's engaging and it's a little bit involved, and then all of a sudden it's just going to be pretty simple. But I wanted to kind of segue into this one because I love this top. I love the color of this top. This is obviously a super similar color, and it's also a way lighter fabric because this is knit with fingering weight yarn. So my goal is to kind of give myself a second option for really toasty days and nights when I want to wear this camisole number 7 and just have an option that's a little bit lighter. But I'm curious to see, because the makeup of this yarn, these more natural plant fibers, they don't really have any bounce back or anything. I'm nervous that the size that I've selected to knit, it might be a little too big. And at the point I am right now, it's about an inch into the body, which I always find is a really good time to try on a top-down knit, because you kind of do have enough of something substantial under the arm to actually see how it's going to fit. So this feels like a really good move for today. Hooray! That took so long. I'm so sorry. Let me pop a knot into this so that I don't lose any stitches, which I'm definitely a few times have been at risk for on those little tiny needles. And I'm gonna stretch this out as much as I can. And then, all right, here we go. If you're wondering what the rest of this try-it-on tubing is on here, which is clearly causing me a little bit of strife at the moment, that is because I decided to cast on all 4 of my straps on this with a provisional cast on so that I could have more control over the length of the straps and therefore the depth of the V and the armhole and all of that, as that was something that other knitters had noted in their Ravelry projects, that some of the strap lengths are maybe a little too long. So we'll have to bear that in mind when we try this on as well. But with that, let's go ahead and end our try it on tubing and chat. And let me get this on in whatever the best way is going to be to do that. It's a good thing that those decorative lines are only on the front and not the back, or else I never would have known which side was which. I didn't think about how tricky it was going to be to try this on with the straps all separate. There we go. Okay. I should have maybe tied these together or something. And there. Okay. We've got it sort of on. This is probably the best I'm going to be able to do with all these straps being separate. I would love to just see that they're kind of working out as they are. And that seems pretty darn good to me. This, I did mention that it's supposed to have negative ease, and I was aiming for something more of a, I think it said I think that the pattern said 0 to 2 inches of negative ease. So I've kind of tried to err on the side of just 0 inches of ease or negative ease. And as of right now, that really does feel like kind of where things are at. It feels like it's snug around the bust, but it's definitely not pulling too much. And it's also not super loose and gapey to the point where I feel like it would stretch too much in blocking. And the goal is to really not stretch this one at all in blocking and just try to keep it kind of as it is intact. I don't want this to wind up too open a gauge. I really want it to stay quite close. So I'm really pleased with where this is at right now. I think that everything's looking really nice. I'm surprised by actually the depth of the V feels like exactly where I would want it to be. I wouldn't want it any lower than where it is. And I do still have that control of the straps. So my thought is probably what I'll wind up doing is after I've blocked this, that's when I'll come back and address the straps, because I could see myself, even as I'm holding this here, I could see myself removing a little bit of length out of these straps just to give it a little bit of wiggle room to kind of stretch and, grow with time. But as of right now, I think this is going extremely well. And so I don't even need to put this onto the hanger. This is where she's at. And so my number one thing right now is just going to be to try and find a cable and needle system that works better for this, that makes me want to work on it more than I have been. Though I still am really pleased with the progress that I've made since it's only been on my needles for 20 days today. So that's everything I think I have to say about my Camisole number 7 Buy My Favorite Things knitwear. I'm going to set a goal for myself to be done with the decorative decreases by the next time I film, so that I can then just be working on the body in this one. And I could probably then still get a little bit of wear out of it before the end of the summer. So that's that. All right, next let's chat about that project that's basically finished, but just needs to be blocked and buttons and some ends woven into. That's going to be my Cordelia top by Witchery Design, which is knit out of that same composition of linen, viscose, cotton. However, it is the Drops Belle, which is more comparable to the Sandisgarn Lena than the Tin Lena, and I'm using the colorways Mint Cream and Black. I will get this one onto the hanger. All right, here we have it. So this is a bottom-up vest style tank top, and I think when we spoke last, it was just down to button bands and little finishing trims and everything. So that has all been completed. It was just a lot of kind of fussy work to finish this one out, but ultimately this has been a pretty simple and quick knit. The only modification that I have made from mine to the original version, other than things like I've definitely knit the body of mine a little bit longer, and probably even could have knit it longer than I did in the end. But otherwise, the only other thing is that my finishes, all of my ribbing, I did finish with a Italian tubular sewn bind off, which means that I've also incorporated those setup rows, which also means that I have just knit my finishes a row longer than what is stated in the pattern. I did that also just because I felt like I needed that little bit more substantial trimming. So these were all supposed to be actually one row less. And instead what I've done is just matched the width of the ribbing to the black stripes. To me, that just felt like it was more in proportion with everything. So that's all done. I need to get buttons on this, get ends woven in. There are going to be quite a few buttons on this one. I actually don't know that I've counted. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, oh my, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I'm going to have 13 buttons on this vest, which is going to be a lot of sewing on buttons, but all the buttonholes are there. And actually, I do have a little acquisition. I thought that I had the buttons for this vest. I think in my head, I've just known for the longest time exactly which buttons were going on it in terms of like the style. So I assumed that I had those somewhere. And then I went looking through my button stash and could not find them. And I was like, wait, did I ever actually own these, or did I just know what I wanted? So I did pick up the buttons. I'll pull them out so I could show them to you here. I always knew that I wanted to go with a little like aged brass style shank button on this, and I have so many buttons in this style, but none that were teeny tiny enough for the button band. So maybe it was even that I thought I had them and didn't. But I think that these are going to look so sweet. I wonder if I could just pop one onto a stitch marker so I could show you really quick. maybe if I just go like this, you could see. I forgot that I had a little trick for trying buttons on, which is just to take a little tapestry needle. Come on, everybody. And use that to pierce the back of the button. So what I will do is, let's find a spot where I've got a buttonhole. All right, that looks about right. Pop this in. I'm gonna stick that shank through the back, and then I'm just gonna use this needle to pierce through the back of that buttonhole. Ah, how cute is that? And then this is actually, I've never tried the buttons through the buttonholes yet. A little snug. There we go. I think that's just because there's no space. You know, when you do the shank style buttons, you have to leave them like a little bit on the looser side, so that they actually have room to go through and have the fabric from the button band sit behind them. But I think that those are just the cutest little buttons for this top, and they're going to dress it up a little bit. So I'm very, very happy to have picked those up. Basically, next steps here are just to get this one blocked. In the blocking process, I am going to try and stretch this one out a little bit. I did originally cast this one on 2 sizes bigger than what I wound up going with in the end. Let me pull up the sizing so I can tell you exactly which size that was. So originally I had cast on the size 2XL and it's bottom up. And when I went and held that up, I thought that was just too big. And then I think I overcorrected and maybe went a little bit smaller, but everything seemed fine when it was all around my waist. I should have checked it around my bust instead, but that's a tricky thing with the bottom up stuff. So in the end, this is fitting like she's got negative ease right now and she's just fitting. I'm gonna try and stretch this out a good bit in like every direction and hope that that works out. The other thing that I didn't realize until this was all said and done, because I just kept thinking, oh, well, once I finish the top of this, it's probably going to correct it. And then once I add the ribbing, it's probably going to correct it. And that is the depth of the neckline itself. I feel like it's sitting just the littlest bit lower than I would have wanted it to. And that's just one of those things when you're knitting from the bottom up, it's so hard to gauge where those things are going to fall. And then I thought maybe adding the ribbing on top was going to close the gap as much as I wanted it to. And then it just didn't. So I really do hope that blocking saves this one, because right now I'm feeling kind of lukewarm about it and potentially considering either starting over or just going back and trying to correct some of those things, because I've imagined myself getting a ton of wear out of this. I think it's going to look so, so cute with just jeans, with the matching skirt, with the other linen skirts and pants that I have. So I really do want this one to be just right, but it's just difficult when you're working from the bottom up. So we're going to see if blocking saves the day. If not, you might hear me talking about this next week in a very different manner. So please wish me luck in that process. I'll also just say it again that this pattern is like super, super bare bones. And I can't necessarily recommend this super basic top for a beginner for kind of all of those reasons: the construction, the lack of hand-holding information. I would say that this is one that you would want to go for if you had a few tank tops under your belt in your knitting arsenal. But I'm still really eager to see. I have my hopes up. I'm still feeling optimistic about it. So we're going to see what happens. Hopefully I'm wearing this in the next episode. And it's been on the needles for 27 days today. Okay, let's have like a little departure and talk about something a little more silly and more fun. So I told you guys in the last podcast episode I was going to be bringing our shark Marvin to its new home, and my friend absolutely loved him. She also loved the little shark hat, so I was thrilled to get those to her. I was doing my absolute best up until the 11th hour, trying to finish the Dachshund as well. And holy moly, someone so kindly pointed out that Allen Dart patterns are intended to be like replica, sort of very involved and intricate and display pieces more than they are toys. And they even said, like, I'm sure you know that now. And I said, I do, because holy, has this dog been a journey. So I thought I was going to be able to get it done in the time that I had left. And I tried so hard. And ultimately I decided if I kept going at the rate that I was going to cut corners and I wasn't going to finish this as well as it should be finished. So I've told my friend that she has one more baby gift on the way and I just need a little time to get it done. So let me bust this thing out and show you. He's adorable. He's just not quite finished. So this is the Dachshund by Allen Dart, which I'm knitting out of some thrifted Wool in the Gang yarn, the Buddy Hemp. Look, I remembered it today, in the colorway Trope Tan. This is going to be the first time you've seen him stuffed. So look at this. I mean, he's adorable, isn't he? So I've made so much progress on this, and it's just a matter of the finishing touches, finishing details. So what's been accomplished since we spoke is obviously he's been stuffed, and the head, the ears, I knit the ears. Those weren't even done. I think that was the only thing I had left to knit when we spoke last. And then his little nose, I also had to knit, which I wound up just using some leftover. You know, I actually think this was leftover drop spell from the Cordelia top. So just a little scrap of black yarn. And then I have sewn on and stuffed the tail as well as one of the back legs. And it's just an ordeal. Sewing the legs, first of all, into themselves, making little like cases out of these. It's a lot of work just to sew this thing up and then to stuff it and sew it onto the body and try to keep it all oriented the right way. I wound up sewing this like on top of itself into parts. At some point I stopped looking at the instructions, because what's also funny about this pattern is once you finish knitting, the last like 2 pages of this alone are just instructions on how to seam it all together. So it's a labor of love, and I'm so happy to do this for my friend, but I will absolutely never do this again. Other than to like literally make a mini OC. I'll never do this for someone else again, because it's been just lots of little tiny details and so much time. I never kept track of how long this one I've been working on it, but it's been way longer than I ever would have expected. And so I'm so ready to be done with it, but also I needed to take a break from it because I was just like, it was me and this guy for days and I couldn't do it anymore. So I still have to seam up the last 3 of the legs and then get those onto the body. Once that's done, I was not going to do this if I was just coming down to the wire, but now that I've given myself a little extra time, I want to add a few little detail elements. So the first one, you'll already see that I've started the eyes. I am using, again, the safety eyes. I did already tell her with Marvin, and she knew right away too that these are more display pieces and just to play with when you're watching the baby. These aren't like toys that you're, just leaving your baby with. She knows that. We all know that. And she was like so eager to put little Marvin on a shelf in the baby's room, which is what I expected. So this is going to be kind of the same thing. So I went ahead and used just the plain black safety eye. And then this isn't part of the pattern, but I started kind of doing a little bit of, I guess, like embroidery around the eye to kind of give him little eyelids, and that changed everything. It kind of started to make this all look a little bit more real. And so the next thing that I want to do with the little details is to add a few, I've never done duplicate stitch, but I want to duplicate stitch a few little highlights and shadows around the face of little Frankie here to make him look more personalized like their dog. So their dog, Frankie, has a little bit more of like a blonde nose. The color of this is definitely like his main body color, but he has a little bit more of like light blonde hairs on his nose. He also has kind of dark fur around his eyes. So I've just been pulling out some of my scraps of yarn, and I'm going to use those to kind of just add a few little detail elements. I also am going to knit up a collar for him, which is part of the pattern. If I'm feeling super ambitious, I might try and knit him a little sweater to match a sweater that they actually have for their dog, just for like extra comic, I don't know, maybe not though. That also feels like that might just be too much at this point, but there's a chance I'll go for it. But mostly it's going to be to just get that collar done, and then a few little detail things of highlighting around the nose and shadowing around the eyes. Something got in my nose from here. And then this thing will be done, and I'll just have to go drop it off to her one of these days. But he's adorable. He's been sitting out just staring at me ever since I finished what I have, and he makes me laugh. I think she's going to love it. But this turned into an ordeal over the week, and I just said, it's not happening. I'll get it to her when I get it to her. The baby's not due till October, so it'll be here before the baby is. That's for certain. And otherwise, that's kind of where we're at with our little Dachshund by Alan Dart. The final project I want to talk to you about today is honestly the one that's been keeping me sane while I've had just the busy end of my season here. If you don't know, I'm a bridal hairstylist, and so by this time of the year, I'm feeling like wiped and just everything's kind of piling up and I've been busy. So that was kind of why I took the time off too. But also my mental capacity is being like split in 7 different directions. So I needed something that was truly mindless knitting. And I also wanted something that I would be able to wear to my sister's baby shower eventually to celebrate her little baby girl that's on the way. So I went ahead and I cast on the Darling Cardigan by Veronica Lindbergh in the KNC Cloud Paca yarn, which is a blown yarn. So it's got I think it's a nylon tube with then like baby alpaca fibers blown into it. And it's really been my main focus since we spoke. So I'll pop around to Helena the Hanga. A lot has happened. Here we have it. I am so excited. I have been working on this for the past 12 days now. Basically, after I filmed last, I cast this one on because we had a soccer game to watch and I didn't have anything mindless to work on. So this felt like the right move for me, and I'm really, really, really glad that I did. So this is a top-down, oversized, cozy cardigan that has a V-neck. It also has a double knit button band. And my favorite detail about this one is the tall 2x2 ribbing that's at the hem of this cardigan. And I'm actually planning to knit mine. So let me see what size I'm knitting this in. So I'm knitting this in the size extra large. I'm also knitting mine on 5mm needles when the pattern calls for 5mm needles. So I got gauged with the 5mm needles. I'm knitting this in the size extra large, which basically I was kind of in between the two sizes, and I decided to size up because I really want this to fit as a little bit more of a cropped and kind of oversized slouchy cardigan. Where it's at right now, I'll pop it on for you in a second. It's fitting exactly how I want it to. So it also feels really, really good to be just in the middle of knitting something top down that's kind of like intuitive and mindless and and straightforward because everything else has been a project and not just knitting lately, and I needed just some good old-fashioned knitting. So this started with the back of the cardigan, and you do start out by kind of casting on a straight edge and working some increases as your standard drop shoulder kind of knit would go. This has a really lovely detail on the back, which is all knit up on that back panel actually, and then kind of just turns into this little stripe, I guess, once you've picked up stitches for the front. So you knit this back down to the bottom of the underarm, then you pick up stitches for the front shoulders, and everything else is worked with just strategic increasing and decreasing for the V-neck and everything. And once everything's knit to the bottom of the underarm, you cast on some stitches onto the arm, and you're joined in the round or in the flat because it's a cardigan, and you continue working some increases for the V-neck. I literally have just finished on my last row of increasing. So where I'm at right now is the point where I get to just keep working to the length of body that I want. And so I actually went ahead and tried this on earlier. I measured where I was and how much longer I wanted this to be to fit me as the cropped cardigan that I'm imagining. So what I've determined is that from the marker that I just popped in today, I really am just going to be knitting another 1.25 inches, so 1.25 inches more of stockinette back and forth. And then I'm going to start my ribbing. So the body is going to be quite short on this one. There's not really going to be much much body after the end of that V-neck, which is exactly what I want. I just want this to fit very kind of like slouchy and oversized and have a little bit more of a casual fit to it, something that I can wear as a standalone kind of button-up top is what I'm thinking. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. Once I finish this ball of yarn that I'm on right now, I'll probably just jump over to the sleeves to get those going, knitting in the round. And then of course, everything's finished off with this gorgeous double knit button band. And I think I'm going to do shell buttons on this one, which similar to the ones that I had just done on my garden party top. So I think that those would kind of pick up nicely on the pinky pastel color of this. And I think it would just dress it up a little bit without doing something too glitzy and glammy, and also not something that's going to weigh it down because this fabric is so super lightweight. This is my second time knitting with a blown yarn, or third time. Okay, correction. This is the third blown yarn type that I'm working with, but I'm going to compare this directly to the Knit Picks Wonder Fluff that I knit my grayling dress out of, and I love the feeling of that garment. It's cozy and soft and like a cloud, but it's so lightweight, so it never feels like it's just hanging on you. And this is the same exact experience. They're very comparable yarns. The only thing that I will say is that definitely working with the K&C Cloud Paca versus the Wonder Fluff, this is a little bit more kind of crunchy, whereas that Cloud Pack or the Wonder Fluff is all just soft, fluffy goodness. This has a little bit more, maybe you feel more of the tube itself or something, or maybe it's just the quality of the baby alpaca that keeps this one from being quite so baby soft. But otherwise, they're very comparable yarns. This was a Joann's exclusive yarn. There's rumors that it's coming to Michael's. We will see. If you see it in your Michael's, I need you to let me know because I'll be there the next day. And really, so far, I've been enjoying this. I am on my second ball of the yarn now. No, this might be the third one, actually. Whichever one it is, it's the first ball that I've started working with that has had like 6 joins in it so far. And that has been driving me a little bit nuts because I've kind of been trying to avoid having to weave in too many ends on this one. And with the exception of like funny little spots like this one, I'm just noticing here where it kind of seems like a little clump of fibers kind of got into the tube or something. That happens along the way. There really hasn't been an issue. And I actually had joined my first 2 balls of yarn together by using a crochet hook. I inserted it into the maybe like 3 inches down the tube and then came out the end, grabbed the new ball of yarn and pulled that into the tube. So I wound up having basically the tubes overlapping each other for like 3 inches of yarn, and I knit it like that. And that felt like a great way to join the yarns. Since then, there have been all these little knots in the yarn, and they're like weak knots to the point where I've pulled on them and it's separated, and I haven't had the crochet hook handy in those times. So I've just been joining in new balls of yarn. So now I have all these silly little ends to weave in when my goal was to not have any ends. So it's not the end of the world, but it was weird because I hadn't experienced that with the yarns prior to this ball. We'll see if it becomes a common theme. Hopefully it's just this one. And you know what? I don't even care because I love the color of this. I love the feeling of it. I'll pop her on so you can see. Of course, I've just wrapped myself up in the yarn, but clearly it's going to be just like a nice kind of boxy, oversized cardigan. Once this V-neck has the double knit button band on it, it's not going to be quite as deep a V, so it will close up this gap a little bit, but I do just think that this is going to look really cute paired over like a lacy bralette or something, and just kind of have it be a little more slouchy and have that baby pink soft color kind of contradict this more oversized, boxy, shapeless fit. I really enjoy that combination. So I'm just, this has been really where my mind has been at since we spoke last, and I'm so happy about it. So yeah, this one's been on my needles for 12 days today. I am going to try and focus a little bit more attention on the Camisole number 7. That fly just flew in here and I thought that was a bat. I'm going to try to focus a little bit more on the Camisole number 7 and then only work on this when it's truly like mindless knitting time. But you know what? I don't even care. I'm feeling like I'm just in sweater mode. And so if this is what's bringing me joy right now, then that's what I'm going to knit on. And I love it. I'm going to cast on another sweater soon because that's just kind of where I'm at in life. So this is the Darling Cardigan. So far, loving the pattern. We're having like a very heavy Veronica Lindbergh pattern year. It's just because these patterns are in my library after having a 50% off discount on them last year. So in the theme of 2025 from the vault, I'm using quite a few of her patterns. And they've been a little bit hit and miss, but the one thing that's always true about her patterns is that they are hit the ground running type knitting. And I love that. It's never like a super complicated start to something. It's always just like easy breezy, cast on the smutty stitches and get knitting. Like there's no barrier to entry with her patterns. And I love that. So I'll forgive every silly little mistake that I find for the fact that when they work, they really, really, really work. And they're some of my most worn knits too. So that's where we're at. Darling Cardigan, 12 days, Cloud Paca, pink, fuzzy sweater. Yay. Let's wrap things up here super, super quickly. There will be no introduction to this pattern. I simply want to try on the itty bitty little collar that I started for my Stitches sweater. I started getting really nervous that I didn't start this in a right size. I'm not saying anything more about this. If you know about it, you know about it. If you don't know about it, then there's 10 billion videos prior to this one that explain more what's going on here. But I simply transferred this onto some try-it-on tubing so that I could hold it up to the collar of my Stitches sweater. And I just have yet to do that. So I'm going to do that uber quickly right now. And just to say that I've done it and I could keep going on this then. All right, so I'm really just trying to make sure that starting in this corner, wrapping around the back of the neck, and then coming to this corner, this is long enough with maybe just like the littlest bit of a stretch, but as long as it's not so long that it's like bunching up, I think we'll be okay. I also imagine, if you're curious, that I'm going to kind of stitch it on like this. So I'll stitch at these two kind of right side together edges, and then I'll be flipping this up to create a nice neat edge on this side, if you were curious as to how I was going to do that. I almost wish I had a pin right now. Do I just use another needle? I'm standing back here. I'm just gonna speak through my thoughts while I kind of pull this all into place and see. So I've just gone ahead and kind of like pinned the front pieces where I want them to live. And then as I pull this around, I'm just making sure that I'm basically going to be able to make contact with every little spot on this without too much stretching, without too much bunching. And I do believe we've got a pretty solid fit. Yeah, perfect. So it looks like it's going to work out absolutely perfectly. I did want to err on the side of it being too small because my thought is that while it will be kind of stretched out at the base, as it gets taller and then it'll be folded in at the top, it can kind of scrunch in a little bit and be a little bit cozier and a little bit warmer. So I think that that's going to work out really, really well. Now I feel like I have the green light to keep going on this. And this is the other thing that I have that's on 3mm needles that I kind of hijacked for my Camisole No. 7. So while that's on Try It On Tubing 2, I can reassess where everything's at, and that's going to work out great. So that is all of the knitting. As I'm looking at my projects, I'm seeing the Camisole No. 7. It's going to be more in that mindless category once we get past the decorative decreases, which shouldn't take too long. My darling cardigan is in a good spot to just kind of keep working on. And then we have all these little fussy things with the stitches sweater and the Cordelia top, which really just needs its ends woven in, blocking and buttons, and then the Dachsund. So I feel like I should actually start considering what I want to be my next cast on. Out of curiosity, would you guys prefer to see next a proper sweater or another cardigan, a jacket? As I'm sitting here thinking about it, I feel like I'm leaning towards my cooler weather knits, trying to get those on the needles next. So if I'm thinking of ones that I've kind of had on the back burner for a little bit, would you guys prefer to see one of the jackets, either the mild shirt jacket or the nomad jacket? Or the Texo sweater? That would be a fun cable knit sweater to get working on. Or the Chantilly cardigan. Those are the ones that are kind of top of mind. If I think of another one, I'll add it in here. But I'd love to know what you'd want to see from me next. And otherwise, I want to know what the heck you're working on. Because I feel like I need to do some more knitting vicariously through you while I wrap up these other projects. And with that, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. If you did enjoy this video, you can let me know by giving it a thumbs up. And if you subscribe and ring the bell, then you're going to be notified anytime I post a new video. However, you can usually expect a Saturday morning upload at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. With that, a big ol' thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.